Okay, hello everyone. I wanted to take a few minutes of your time. Please watch this video. This will help you with week 3, okay? What we're talking about here and what they're talking about in week 3 is methods and the scientific approach to sociology. What is science? It's a logical system that bases knowledge on direct systematic observation. In sociology, we're studying society based on systematic observation of social behavior. What is that? It's information we can verify with our senses. A scientific orientation often challenges our common sense assertions. If you go back and you read the example that's provided in the introduction to week 3, you will see an example of this when they examined the notion that immigrants commit more crimes than people who are not immigrants. In fact, that's false, demonstrably false, based on the data. Okay? So that's an example of what we mean by challenging common sense. Okay. So here we have what's called so there are a number of different elements of scientific sociology that we have to keep in mind. First of all, the idea of a concept. A concept is a mental construct that represents some part of the world in a simplified form. For our example that I'm going to use in the second video, that will be a companion to this video, I'm talking about religiousness, how religious people are. It's called religiosity in the sociology of religion, okay? So how will we get at that? Well, we need to specify, that is, state what's being measured. You can't just take it at face value if somebody says, I'm religious, what that means, okay? So we would ask people about whether they attend services, whether they have some idea of something that happens extra naturally. Do they study the scriptures of their particular religion? Do they, and so forth. Attitudes. Does their religion explain things that otherwise can't be explained? We're not making a value judgment about religion. We're just talking about how it functions in people's individual lives and collectively. So a variable is a concept that changes from case to case. We know from the data that some people are very religious, but increasingly people are not religious at all. A measurement is a procedure for determining the value of a variable in a specific case. Once we've decided exactly what we're going to measure or operationalizing this variable religiosity, we can then effectively measure, okay, what it means to be religious in terms of the definition that we provided. Okay. So to get at this, sometimes what we do is we first describe our data. Remember, we're in the business of testing a hypothesis, which is an if-then statement that we can verify or we can reject based on what the data tell us. But first, we have to describe what we're looking at. Let me give you 3 examples: the mean, the median, and the mode. The mean is the arithmetic average of all measures for each case, obtained by adding them up and dividing them by the number of cases. Say I wanted to know what the average income was for Ohioans. I would add up all the values that I had for people usually over 18 who are working either part-time or full-time, and then divide it by the number of cases, the number of people who earned an income. and I would get an average. Sometimes, though, this can be misleading. For example, the state of Washington, where Bill Gates lives. Bill Gates is a billionaire. So his wealth, I mean, he makes, $2 billion a year, pulls up the average. So in the state of Washington, the mean income is about $85,000. But before I pack up my car and move to Washington, what I want to do is to double check that. So to do that, we often check the mean against something called the median, the score at the halfway point in an ascending series of numbers. That takes care of those particularly low or high values that we might have. So basically, what that means is that we would line up if I'm talking about the state of Washington still, we line up all the income values from lowest to highest. If we look at the median point, the one that occurs halfway, it's about $35,000. Quite different than $85,000, right? Finally, another way we describe data in terms of case-by-case elements is something called a mode, the score that occurs most often. Men and women in a class who identify as male or female. Right? There's no way of rank ordering that. So what we're going to do is to take the number that occurs the most. Okay. We also want to try for something called reliability and validity. Reliability is consistent in measurement. The process has to yield, I should say, the same range of results and repeated. When you take a multiple choice test, for example, you're either going to answer, or a true-false question, you're either going to get a true or a false. There's no, so you have a reliable measure. It gets the same range of results. Validity, though, goes when we're actually measuring exactly what we intend to measure, hitting the target on the bullseye. Often there's a tension between the two. That's why when we're assessing your knowledge, we have you write as well. That's a validity. It's a valid measure of your knowledge versus a reliable one. We have to establish cause and effect. Correlation is just as it sounds. It's a correlation. It's a relationship in which two or more variables change together. We not only look at how variables change, because there's all sorts of variables that change together that aren't related to each other, but the degree to which one variable, the cause or the independent variable, affects the other variable, the effect or the dependent variable. So we look for correlation, but we also look for cause and effect, a relationship in which change in one variable causes change in another. We need to be guard against what we call a spurious or false correlation. That is, when two variables change together but neither one causes the other. Murder and ice cream, for example, are both correlated. They change together, right? But the fact is, there's a third factor that causes both of them. They're not in any way related to each other. The third factor is temperature. When temperatures increase, homicides increase. When temperatures increase, the lines at the UDF for ice cream products and milkshakes, increases, but they're not related. So to be sure of a real cause and effect relationship, we have to show that variables are correlated, that the causal variable occurs before the dependent variable, the effect, and that there's no evidence that a third variable has been overlooked, causing a spurious correlation. Let me give you an example. Gender and income. Okay, we can use gender, an independent variable, to predict income. And indeed, If we're looking at a critical or conflict-based theory about allocation of resources along gender lines, we know that women make less money than men. But one's gender, in this case, would be the independent variable, or the cause, and level of income at the particular time that the measurement was taken would be the effect. Okay. At any time, please pause and make a note of this. So, scientists refer to the cause as the independent variable, and the effect as a dependent variable. Understanding cause and effect is valuable. It allows researchers to predict how one pattern of behavior will produce another. So, research methods are how we do sociology. Remember, in Unit 2, or Week 2, we discussed theoretical perspectives, symbolic interaction, structural functional, and conflict theory. Please review those. Each of these methods sort of lends itself to one of these different perspectives, more or less. Let's look at each of these in turn. So the experimental method is where a research method investigates cause and effect under highly controlled conditions. We test a specific hypothesis, a statement of how two or more variables are related. Okay? What's an example of an experiment? So, evidence needed to reject or accept the hypothesis occurs in 4 steps. First, we state which variable is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable. Second, we measure the initial value of the dependent variable. Third, we expose the dependent variable to the independent variable. And fourth, we measure the dependent variable again to see what change, if any, took place. For you, we have a practical example right here in our sociology class. You took a pretest at the beginning of this class. The dependent variable, the independent variable, is going to be the application of the class material to your understanding. So we got a baseline where we measured your understanding of this in the pretest. We expose you, so in so many words, to the treatment that is this class material. And then at the end of class, we do a post-test and we see whether the change has been what it's called statistically significant. We measure the dependent variable again, your knowledge of sociology, to see if any change took place. This is a powerful tool that we use when we evaluate educational approaches, programs, and so forth. Surveys are often used in sociology. They're a research method in which subjects respond to a series of statements or questions in a questionnaire or an interview. They target some population. Researchers usually study a sample of the population. And what we do is we try to sample in a way that our sample reflects the population. Another aspect of sociology that we need to look at is a symbolic aspect, or how we construct meaning. This participant observation is not about hypothesis testing, but about theory building. It happens when we don't know what's going on. It's a valid rather than a reliable measure. And so, what are we talking about here? Well, what we have, is a way investigators systematically observe people while joining them in their routine activities. It's called field work. It's exploratory and descriptive. We do it when we don't have an idea about the expected relationship between between a set of variables, and we do it when we don't know about a subject, and we also do it when we want detailed knowledge of a particular social setting or social reality that we could not otherwise get. Philippe Bourgeois, in his book In Search of Respect, Selling Crack in El Barrio, looked at people who were dealing crack in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. He won the trust of the people. He interviewed them. He didn't help them sell crack, of course, but he did protect them by going so far as to go to jail for a month rather than to divulge any information to law enforcement authorities. Why? He wanted a pure sense of what was going on, and clearly we're not going to do a sample of crack dealers. Okay? Sometimes we use available data. This is often the case. Data collection, surveys are expensive. They're expensive to set up, to administer. We don't know about the response rates. There are excellent sources of existing data already. Government agencies, and as well as National Opinion Research Council and the Pew Trust are entities that have provide a wealth of data. In the government, we have the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor, the Department of Justice provide data about a host of issues from the economy to crime rates to aspects of the population, poverty, education, and so forth. So we also, though, need to say that we need to look at the data and look at how it's collected to make sure that that it's accurate for our purposes. Finally, something we don't cover in text, but which is important and which you've already done, is analyzing an artifact, a content analysis. In your case, you analyze newspaper articles for assignment 2, right, for week 2. It's not people, but cultural artifacts, newspaper articles, trade journals, textbooks, television shows, music lyrics, all provide data. So, that's a quick overview of scientific sociology. Please review this video, stop it at any time, and please watch the companion video, which is going to be how to read a table. Thank you and have a great week.